Welcome to the Spirit of Leadership podcast. Listen in as we talk with emerging as well as seasoned leaders, change makers, and visionaries, and hear their stories, how they have overcome challenges, how they cultivate inspired vision as stewards and mentors, shining their light to uplift and empower others, reconnecting us through a sense of belonging to the natural world and to the interweaving circles of just and vital communities. Hi, Carl.
Hi, how are you, Megan?
I'm so good, and I'm so glad to have you here on the Spirit of Leadership podcast and to give you the chance to speak from your heart and your wonderful spirit for the processes and the insights and all of the wisdom that you embody.
Well, that's extremely kind. Thank you.
Well, I really appreciate you and all your work and our longtime friendship with you. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Me too.
And I just wanted to say for our listeners that Carl Safina's lyrical nonfiction writing explores how humans are changing the living world and what the changes mean for non-human beings and for us all. His work fuses scientific understanding, emotional connection, which is a wonderful part of your work, and a moral call to action. His writing has won, among others, a MacArthur Genius Prize, Pew, Guggenheim, and National Science Foundation fellowships, book awards, among others from Lannan, Orion, and the National Academies. And he grew up raising pigeons. I love knowing the background of how you came to all of this love and exploration. So he grew up raising pigeons, training hawks and owls, and spending as many days and nights in the woods and on the water as he could. Safina is now the first endowed professor for nature and humanity at Stony Brook University and is founding president of the not-for-profit Safina Center, which you can learn more about going to safinacenter.org. He hosted the PBS series Saving the Ocean, which can be viewed free at pbs.org. Safina is the author of 10 books, including the classic Song for the Blue Ocean, as well as New York Times bestseller Beyond Words, What Animals Think and Feel. His most recent book is Alfie and Me, What Owls Know, What Humans Believe. He lives on Long Island, New York, with his wife Patricia and their dogs and feathered friends. And his work explores how we are changing the natural world and what that means for human and non-human beings. He sees that the durability of human dignity and survival of the natural world will depend on each other. We cannot preserve the wild unless we preserve human dignity, and we cannot conserve human dignity while continuing to degrade nature. His lyrical nonfiction writing, and it is so beautifully written, Carl, that little phrase holds a lot of meaning.
Oh, thank you.
Fuses scientific understanding, emotional connection, and a moral call to action. So with that, I would like to open it up for you to speak about what's going on for you right now and what's on your heart and in your mind.
Good questions. All kinds of things. I guess we could start with one big one and say the least about it. There's a lot of turmoil in the country and in the world. That is certainly on my heart and on my mind. it's distracting, it's distressing. It makes it hard to stay focused on the work I'm trying to do right now. Well, one of the things I'm trying to do right now, which is a book that I'm working on. I'll tell you a little bit more about that. We've had the coldest winter this year in this region since 1976. And in 1976, I was in college and I was studying the winter territories of mockingbirds. So I was outside for many hours a day that very cold and very snowy winter. I remember it quite well. And this is actually the coldest stretch, the longest stretch of sub-freezing temperatures that we've had. So I'm looking for signs of spring. I'm not seeing very many. It's starting to warm up a little bit now. There's still plenty of snow on the ground here. Some redwings came back, and the turkeys, the wild turkeys, are starting to court. And I've heard a few little snippets of song, mostly from the Carolina wrens around my house. And I guess I should just mention where I'm living. I live on Long Island, New York. I have never seen ice in the ocean. We have a lot of frozen bays this winter, a lot of ice on Long Island Sound. I've never seen ice on the ocean, but very recently I've seen some video of ice all around Montauk Point and on the south side. So we've really had quite a cold winter here, and as I said, I'm looking for signs of spring. Um, the owl that we raised 8 years ago, that from a dying orphaned chick that was found on somebody's lawn, is doing quite well. Her mate was gone most of the winter, which is typical, even though this species is not supposed to be migratory. But he has come back, as they often do, by about mid-February. He's around a lot now, very regularly, so I'm looking forward to them starting to court again and breed again March, April, May. Usually she lays eggs in April and the chicks hatch in May and they fledge in June. So I'm anticipating all that nice stuff. I'm working on a book about cognition and awareness and consciousness, where it comes from, who has it, where we got ours, what in the world it is, how consciousness is generated, looking at all of that stuff. It's very, very difficult. The strange thing is nobody really understands it. So that's a little wrap up of me. I have two dogs in the house right here, right now, and they're both snoozing quite nicely at the moment. Hopefully they'll stay calm for the rest of the time that we're talking.
That's wonderful. We have a pair of wrens that have made a nest in our front porch because we have an opening by the door that we decided not to close up. And they've been in their nest all winter, coming and going. So I'm hoping that's helping them through the cold weather.
Yeah, I'm sure it is.
We've seen them raise now a couple of years in a row, whole flock, and guide them out of the front porch and out into the world. It's so amazing to watch that happen.
It's always a miracle, yes.
So I'd like to read the last paragraph, which I think is so beautiful, from Song for the Blue Ocean. Such a perspective frees the mind and opens doors to a lifetime of boundless inquiry, to a wealth of enriching insights and reflection, to the chance to be more fully human, to the possibility of making a meaningful contribution. And I just love how you bring that all together and show us what your driving purpose is and how much you've done that. The only prerequisites for taking this path are respectfulness and an extravagant desire for exploration, which I think that's a great phrase. Both impulses that build an elevated sense of vitality and purpose. The promise that any honest inquiry into the reality of nature also yields insights about ourselves and the dramatic context of the human spirit. For each of us, then, the challenge and opportunity is to cherish all life as the gift it is, envision it whole, which is one of, I think, the most powerful ways to work with everything so that we can stay hopeful.
Yes.
Seek to know it truly, which you help us do, and undertake with our minds, hearts, and hands to restore its abundance. And I just appreciate that so much. And I'd like to give you a chance to tell us a story of when that came to the forefront for you. And you were in the midst of that inquiry, and hopefully you were given some insight that gave you the feeling that you could keep going with this.
I feel like it's just been a constant opening of the flower. I was just very enthused about animals as a kid. I wanted to help do something about conservation. When I learned, as a kid, I learned that there were problems. There was a word endangerment. There was a problem extinction. I saw in adolescence many of the woodlands and woodlots converted into office complexes and housing tracts. Um, I guess maybe there was, I mean, there certainly was a moment that I remember. I can't say it was the defining moment because I don't think I had one defining moment, but there were some woods that I could reach on my bicycle, and I used to love going there I had one friend who was also interested in just tromping around in the woods and turning logs over and looking for little living things, catching snakes and salamanders and stuff like that, making terrariums at home. And we went to the woods one day and there were a bunch of bulldozers there and they were just knocking all the trees over. That was very traumatizing kind of a thing that I never forgot. I'm not even sure it was really a turning point because I was too young to turn much of anything. It just stayed in my mind and made me realize that things, people change things. It doesn't matter if you love a thing or a place, that love alone doesn't protect it. And maybe that's just a lesson I took from that moment. But then I went to college and I went to graduate school and I volunteered for different things. And one thing led to another, and I got involved in various things. And I got involved in a job that I didn't want to stay in. I backed out of that and I went to a thing I had volunteered for and made that into a job. Well, it helped get that made into a job for me. That was a lot better. So I just feel like it's just been a constant opening. I think maybe a really important thing for me, I did not grow up around people who were eternally curious at all. I grew up around a lot of adults who just seemed to get to adulthood and stay there. Much later, I met people who were much more motivated and creative and curious about the world, and they were great role models for me. And I read a book a long time ago. The title of the book was Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. And I'm sure you know that book. And it makes the point that it's important to have a beginner's mind, not to think that you acquire a certain amount of knowledge and then you're done. I guess I took that phrase really deep. I sometimes feel like I have a beginner's mind to a fault because I often feel like I don't really know much of anything. But on the other hand, I think that's better than thinking that you know a lot about everything, because nobody knows a lot about everything. The people who think they really, really know a lot tend to be people I don't like to be around. I think it was that kind of curiosity. And then another thing is appreciation. I was not raised with the idea of appreciating the world or all the gifts or the situation I found myself in. It was just there. It was just like, this is how things are. But later in life, I started to realize, how extraordinary everything is, including just my situation in the world compared to almost everybody else in the world who, have traveled. I've seen many people who have no opportunities at all, and certainly their mental and emotional endowments are equal to mine, many of them. There are many people who have a tremendous amount of potential who just never get any opportunity to fulfill all the different roles and ways of enjoying and experiencing life that they could, because they live in extraordinarily limiting or worse circumstances. So that has made deep impressions on me as far as just my luck, really, quite frankly, and trying to make sure that I took advantage of my luck by trying to do things with my abilities to the best of my abilities.
Yeah, thank you for giving us a window into, your experience. I grew up going out into the natural world and collecting tadpoles, and that's my whole beginning. I just found a picture of our son who, when he and his friends would go out into the woods around here and overturn logs and look for
Uh-huh.
salamanders.
Right.
And that's such a gift to have had that experience, and so heartbreaking to see that devastated.
Yeah.
And so I feel so much for you. I feel the same way. I have a hard time whenever I see any trees being cut down and the changes. And then I can only imagine what it's like being aware of what's happening in the oceans. So what you bring to us, the awareness, as heartbreaking as it is, I just honor your mission of inquiry
Mhm.
and exploration with that sense of beginner's mind. Because, yes, I was thinking about that when you were saying it's just been an unfolding. And that's beginner's mind, and that curiosity. And somehow inside that is an appreciation of the natural world and a sense of awe.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've had those senses of appreciation and awe, but I've also been fortunate to be in positions to try to do something about it. You mentioned the oceans. I was very, very involved for quite a while in some initiatives to reform fisheries policy, to write new fisheries laws, a lot of lawsuits that I was involved in to block certain things or reverse certain decisions on behalf of conservation and the recovery of fish populations. And a lot of them actually worked. One amazing thing is that despite the tremendous depletion in the oceans in most of the world, we have on our coast, actually in US waters, we have quite a few recovering fish populations because of some of the work that we did in the 90s and some of the legislation that I worked on then and some of the fights that we managed to win. We lost some things, but we won some big things. And the positives of that continue to reverberate, actually. So, although I guess in this region, the situation in the oceans is very diminished from the time when I was a little boy, it's actually greatly improved in the last 25 years or so. And as you know, we have all these schooling fish along the beach now, most summers, called these fish called menhaden. They're there in the millions, and they bring the whales right into view, right beyond the surf, and the dolphins. We have recovering populations of tuna, and a lot of the smaller fish are doing better than they were doing in the 90s. So there are good things that show that if you get involved and you keep working at it, you can actually sometimes make a big difference in some things.
Love that, to have that sense of what you're doing and that you are seeing the repercussions of that coming forward. And it's one of the most glorious things out here for me, be able
Yeah,
to see the whales and the
sure.
dolphins. And
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
For a long time, whales were obviously hunted for several centuries, and the worst of that was in the 1960s, was when we were in elementary school. That wasn't in the Moby Dick times of the 1800s. It was in the 1960s that it was the worst. And some of the populations went extinct, and there was a lot of worry that some of the species would go extinct. That was almost entirely stopped in the late 80s. And that's a while ago now, that's like 40 years ago now. And we're seeing those populations recover. For most of our lives, we never saw a whale from the shore. It was extremely rare to see a whale of any kind anywhere at all. And now, when we walk our dogs in the morning in the summertime, it's unusual if we don't see a whale. So, how great is that?
I've wondered also, are they changing where they're going for certain reasons? I'm
It's
ocean
both
currents
things.
or
It's that those fish were protected that they feed on, and those fish are living along the shores outside the surf line because that's where they live. They live in pretty shallow water along the coast, so that is bringing them closer. But also, there are just a lot more than there were 40 years ago. That's a long time for some new generations to be born and to grow up. And so there are a lot more, and they're coming closer because the fish also that they feed on have been protected. So it's both of those things.
oh, these are questions I've had walking along the ocean, so this is great. And you're looking into the consciousness, the awareness, the intelligence of what you call non-human beings. And what do you find in your exploration around whales and dolphins and any of those amazing sea creatures? Have you had any experience with that?
Oh yeah, I guess the most amazing, and I guess in a sense the deepest experience that I had was quite a long time ago when I was working on my PhD. I was studying the seabirds called terns, and I was studying how they find fish on the ocean. So I was actually in a small boat in the ocean, not too far from shore, within a mile or two usually, because that's where most of the birds were feeding most of the time. And I can't remember if it was the first or the second summer of the 4 summers I did that. At any rate, I think it was the first year. I was out there in my boat and I suddenly heard like a loud breath, like a loud exhalation. And I looked down, and next to the boat was a beluga whale, a species that is usually not found within 1,000 miles of here. They're mostly an Arctic species. In the course of my lifetime, I know of, I believe, 4 beluga whales that have been seen in Long Island waters. And this one suddenly showed up where I was doing the work with the terns. And they're very social, and it was alone. And I guess it was just lonely, and it came to hang out. And most mornings, because I would get out there as the light was coming up. So I was usually the first and only boat there for a while. And most mornings it would come and find me and follow me around. Occasionally I'd get in the water with it or I would interact a little bit. And it was one of the many experiences I've had that showed that these animals are not, they're not just animals and they're not just scenery and they're not just automatic living mechanisms. They're actually individuals. They have emotions, they have relatability, they relate, and we can relate to them. And one of the most important things, I guess, is to realize that we can relate to each other across these species differences, which are really, in many ways, very superficial differences. You know, the owl that I mentioned that we raised, she's about to be 8 years old, and she's been free flying now for years. And she has had two mates. Current mate is her second mate. She's raised 21 babies. And she occasionally comes and flies right over to me. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, she landed on my arm. I often go outside after dark, and if I call, she will come, and land on a tree branch near me. But recently, she just landed right on my arm after all this time. And the amazing thing is that the line that led to mammals and the line that led to birds diverged about 300 million years ago, way, way, way before there were even dinosaurs. That line diverged. And yet, a little bird like this and I can seek each other out and enjoy the pleasure of our mutual contact because we think 300 million years is a long time. But all that time ago, the general vertebrate skeleton was already there, the nervous system was already there. We already were so close to being identical, and we retain this ability to recognize and relate to one another. And if anything is profound, that is profound. We almost never think of it that way. You see a bird outside, it's just a bird, and you think of it almost as an object. And our language forces us to call it an object. We can call a human being he or she or they, and other creatures or trees or flowers, they all get called it. We don't have a pronoun to designate something else as alive or as from life. So a bird and a tree and a car and a garbage pail all just seem like things out there. But the differences could not be deeper and more profound than they are. The differences between living things and non-living things, or natural things and human-made things. That living things are all so closely related that it's the most important thing that we can really understand.
And wouldn't you say that's the Western, maybe not just Western, but the certain mindset that
It,
thinks
it
that
is
way?
mostly a Western thing. It's mostly the defining thing of Western philosophy and the Western view of the world is that humans and the rest of the world are very different from one another, and humans have really alienated themselves from the world in this view. If you look at the other major ways of looking at the world, which I would say there's four. I would say there's the Western view, there's the indigenous view,
Right.
people who are still land-based, and have deep ancestry in a place. There's South Asian and there's East Asian, and all of those overlap somewhat, but they're also quite distinctive. All of them, except the West, all of them see living things as related and relatives, see the natural world as a cyclic thing that is all made of relationships. But in the West, It's humans and everything else is just a bunch of objects, like a bag full of marbles that don't have anything to do with one another. So that has proven really catastrophic because the other thing that the West invented was the monetary system that we use. And that's a way of representing our values. And the monetary system and the economic system have globalized, and they've brought the Western devaluation of the natural world along with them. And so for other cultures, when they would want to go and gather some medicinal plants or to cut down a tree or to hunt for food, they would have ceremonies, they would ask permission, they would give thanks. They valued the world before, during, and after their interactions and their use of it. And we don't value the world at all, which is why polluting it is free and it's not viewed in the monetary sense, it's not viewed as any kind of an expense to manufacturing or anything like that. It should be a huge expense to pollute and harm the world. I mean, you and I live in a region where most of the groundwater is polluted with industrial chemicals because a lot of manufacturing places just put their waste down pipes into our drinking water supplies, into our groundwater. How polluting the groundwater or polluting the air could ever have been done without a thought is really astonishing. But that's what happens when a culture that devalues the entire physical and living world globalizes.
And views the natural world as resources to be exploited.
Well, the thing is, it's not only that the rest of the world is viewed as resources, it's viewed as only resources. And actually, here, its only value is to serve us. A living tree, a standing forest have no value until you cut the trees down and use them in some way. And that was not the case in any other cultures.
But don't you find it fascinating that as children, we have that connection? It gets enculturated out of us.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Yeah, there is a lot of curiosity about everything as children. And oddly, our way of learning often involves actually a narrowing and a shedding of what we know or what we feel intuitively, which is not really learning at all in a sense.
No, and that way of education of basically narrowing down curiosity. But going back to what you were talking about, relatedness, that the need, it's a soul need to relate and be in relation. And we experience that as children, whether it's supported or not, which is, a whole another question. But it's wonderful when you do find through the arts or through innovative education or other ways of creating the environment for children to be able to have that experience of the natural world. So,
yeah. But how often have you been somewhere and seen some parent yanking some child along who's just trying to stop and look at some things and don't touch that, it's dirty, leave that alone. I mean, I really can't stand that. It's a psychic abuse, really. And then what happens is that part goes dead in the kid.
yeah, or just the worry of like when a kid is climbing a tree or climbing up onto a rock and they just are having this amazing experience. And the fear, the inability to see that child is so capable of doing that.
Yeah.
So tell us your latest adventure. While you're
My
writing, you must be taking some adventures.
my latest adventure. I've been, let's see, where was my latest adventure? I can't even quite remember. I went to a conference in Ireland in the fall. Before that, I went to Mozambique. I went to see a project it's really driven and is the brainchild of an American philanthropist who has made it his life's work to rehabilitate some of the national parks and natural areas in Mozambique that were largely destroyed and had all the animals shot out of them for food during the 30 years of civil war in that country that made everybody extremely poor. And he's in there trying to secure and rehabilitate the natural areas, but using that as an anchor to do a lot for the human dignity of the country as well, creating schools and hospitals and various business opportunities, showing some people who were like hand to mouth farmers. He's helped to show them how they could raise coffee and export it and earn income doing that. So he's done a lot of that kind of stuff for people while also bringing in animals from other countries and repopulating these parks where there were essentially no animals left. I was there to see that in the summertime. That was in August. In July, I was out on the Pacific Ocean on a tuna tagging project, putting these electronic tracking tags into tuna where they can actually follow them all around in the ocean. And the person who does that is from Stanford University, and she's been doing a lot of this work in every ocean where these fish live for decades. And she has totally not only revolutionized our sense of where they are, she's created our sense of where they are, because before that, no one knew how they travel, where they go, how long they stay in different places, what their routes are. So I participated a bit in that.
What did you discover? Did you have a sense of some of that and it was confirmed, or was it surprising?
Well, I haven't seen any of the results of those
Oh,
tracks yet. That
mm,
that will come in a year or so, but I've seen the results of the tracks of many of the other fish that have been tagged, and I've done tagging with her since the late 90s, actually, at the beginning of her project. And I mean, I'm when I go with her, I'm just a humble rod and reel fisherman. She's really the entire brains behind all of it, and she's got the lab and the students and everybody who does all the science work. And she has shown what the different populations are, what the limits of the populations are, how they migrate across ocean basins, and all the really astonishing things that they do.
amazing. And this is probably just another big subject, but it just occurred to me the migration of ocean creatures and the migration of birds. Do you have any insights you can give us about what it is at play there?
Well, there are a lot of animals that migrate, obviously, fish and birds, and a few insects. There are some long distance butterflies that migrate and dragonflies. Um, oh, well, and there are migratory reptiles too. There are sea turtles who go on very long migrations. So there are some in most of these groups, especially the vertebrate groups, the some of the mammals, some of the birds, as I said, some of the insects, some of the reptiles. the sea turtles. They, some of them have very long distance migrations spanning quite a few thousand miles. There are birds that can fly for like 20 days without stopping, going from the Arctic to islands in the Southwest Pacific. There are terns that, well, there are a lot of birds that migrate from the Arctic or the temperate areas to the subtropics and the tropics. There's an Arctic tern goes from the Arctic to the Antarctic, sees more daylight than any other creature on Earth, and goes farther than any other creature on Earth. And mostly what drives all of this is that their food moves or seasonally becomes unavailable. You know, things in our area, like in the winter, there are no bugs. All the insect eating birds have to leave. Almost all of them have to leave. So the food either goes away or it migrates also, which happens in the ocean a lot. Food migrates. And for some of these migrants, the feeding grounds are very far from the breeding grounds. So you have turtles that migrate thousands of miles but have to come to certain specific beaches where they nest. And same thing with whales. Some of the whales, many of the whales, migrate very far from where they eat to where they give birth. Those are the main reasons. A lot of it is instinctive, and a lot of it is learned by young animals following flocks or following older animals, very occasionally following their own parents. That's a whole other tremendous onion of layered mysteries about all these animals, what they do over the course of the year, what they need, and how they do it and how they navigate. Birds at least can add vision over long distances, but in the ocean, there are very few places in the ocean where you can see 200 feet. And yet, many of these animals migrate with exquisite, incredible accuracy back to the same place that they were the last time or where they were born. It's, I mean, like almost anything about nature, when you actually pause to consider it, it is completely mind-boggling, and most of it completely overwhelms anything that we actually understand about it.
Yeah, and then when you think about domesticated dogs or cats who can find their way back somewhere.
Yes, and when I was in, I guess, fifth grade or so, I read a book called The Incredible Journey, and it's a novel. I think it's based on a true story. I'm not even sure about this, but anyway, it was about two dogs and a cat who somehow got displaced or left behind or something, and they find their way home. I really got into that book as a little boy. I really liked it. But there are many well documented instances of cats and dogs finding their way home from enormous distances. And when I was a kid, as you mentioned, raising homing pigeons, I raised homing pigeons from the time I was 7 years old. Homing pigeons, you can take them hundreds of miles from where they live and let them go, and they go up and they circle a few times, which is called getting their bearings because they're getting their bearings, and then they just go on a straight line and they go home.
Amazing. So, do you have any sense of what I think I remember hearing something about silica crystal, something in the brain that helps with navigation?
Some of the animals actually have magnetite, so they actually have a biological compass. And some of them use the stars. Birds appear to be able to see the Earth's magnetic fields and use that as a way of seeing the north-south orientation visually, apparently. There are a number of different ways that they manage to accomplish these feats.
Amazing. I feel like we could just continue talking for a long time, and I just love being in this world with you. And I was wondering if there was anything that you would like to say to people, anything you'd like them to get behind on your website or the Safina Center that you'd like to draw people's attention to.
Sure. I mean, what I have on offer is the various books and articles that I write about some of these topics. Not for profit that I have is called the Safina Center. You can see it at safinacenter.org. You can see my writings at carlsafina.org. The Safina Center, we're trying to help younger people and mid-career people to move forward with our mission, which is making a case for life on Earth. Some of them are mainly writers and speakers. Some of them are filmers and photographers. Some of them do very active conservation work. Some of them are activists for policy, climate activists, and indigenous rights activists and things like that. Yeah, I just think none of us can do everything, but every one of us can do something. So I think it's important to just pick one thing to show up for and get involved in, be active doing. I think that's a really important thing. It's easy to feel overwhelmed. It's easy to feel like, oh, I'm only one person. I can't do anything. But everybody's always only one person. And the trick is to stop being one person and show up with other people.
Yeah, and thank you for the Safina Center being a hub to be able
Mhm.
to tap into what draws us to that.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you so much for all the work you do and the writing you do. And so I encourage people to find your books and touch back into that heart connection with the natural world and the delight and the curiosity. And just thank you for all the work you do.
Well, thank you very much for having me here with you with this conversation. And Megan, I hope to see you around soon, as we
Yeah.
often cross paths in the neighborhoods.
Oh, one thing I wanted to mention
Yeah.
was you as a percussionist and the
I guess
surprise of
that's
having
yes.
seen you lead your band from the position of the percussionist. I just would like to ask you how that helps energize you or move you or be a leader having that
Well,
artistic.
most of my work is with words, and most of my musical work has no words. Often we don't have a singer. Sometimes we have a singer. Actually, I have a few gigs coming up with a fantastic singer named Mala Waldron. Anyway, when I'm playing the drums, I feel like it's a the great power of music is it helps to create community, and that's a very active thing. On the other hand, for the hour or so that we're doing a concert, it's not my job right then and there to help save the world. I can take a little bit of a break from that and just get my body and my emotions involved and turn my head down a little bit.
Oh, that's wonderful. And also, there is that aspect of music, especially percussion, such a wonderful aspect of being part of the rhythm of the natural world.
Yes,
So,
exactly.
so thank you, Carl.
You, Megan.
Look forward to seeing you soon.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks again.
Spirit of leader.